Alright, this is Power Options Explained for Jammix. You will not find an I/O board from Mister that has as many power options as Jammix, so it should suit whatever need you have for whatever setup that you have. And we'll go through and cover all of the power options. We'll give them a little test here. We'll take some measurements with the multimeter as well as a little USB tester that I have right here to show voltage. While we're covering all the options, just to show everybody here, I have a Wi-Fi, a keyboard, and a Bluetooth plugged in. So these are not super heavy modules. They do draw a little bit of amperage. I'll kind of show that here as we test each power supply and go over all the options. The only one that I won't test live is the JAMA plug, because I don't have a power source for it right this moment. And also because it's difficult to get into the case, but I think we can cover everything without actually plugging it in. We can talk about all the options. So let's talk about the JAMA plug, or your arcade harness. Now, Jammix will work with a MVS harness, it will work with a CHAMA harness, or a JAMA harness. Jammix needs a 5 volt and 12 volt. The 12 volt is to power the audio amp right there. And important thing to remember is you always want to plug in with your 12 volt and 5 volt up here at the top. If you have negative 5 volt on your harness, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but Jammix doesn't need it. So other things to keep in mind is you definitely want to make sure that your arcade power supply is outputting 5 volts. You should definitely use a multimeter to measure it. So, because of course, the De10, Jammix, and all of the little USB modules you may have are going to want everything at 5 volts. And so we try to get it as close to 5 volts. We don't have to be super anal. I think most of the modern hardware like Jammix and the De10 have a little bit more play. I've seen De10s go as low as 4.5 volts and as high as as high as 5.25 volts. That's not really good for them, but I've seen them operate and function at normal range at those specifications. But closer to 5 is better. But you don't have to be too anal about it at the same time. So let's go ahead and test out the De10 power supply. Let me see if I can find that one here. So here it is. I will go ahead and plug this in. This is a 2 amp 5 volt power supply. Again, we're going to plug this into the fan board up here. So this is the main 5 volt. And when we do that, we get the soft power functionality. So when I power this on, and you got to remember I have 3 USB modules in it right now. Not too bad. Yeah, you're seeing it start to dip here. So it dips between 4.8, 4.9. So it's staying on the 4.9 side this time. You also have to remember, by the time power gets to the USB, it's going through some of the self-resetting fuses on Jammix, which are really good. All of the USBs have them. Snackport has them. So if you have something that's overpowering your USB or snack ports, your board will be protected. And I think those fuses are rated at, I think, a little over 750 milliamps. So you should probably get about an amp in real world. We'll go ahead and test the De10 power supply. Now this is a brand new one, so it's going to be really good out of the box. Let me see if I can put this where you guys can see it a little bit better. And right here at the fan board, you're seeing I'm measuring about 5 volts, which is good. Probably like 4.9 by the time it gets to the De10 through the ribbon cable and through everything, and through the fuses. So I mean, the De10 power supply is not bad, but as it ages and long term, and if you're going to start using like lots of USB devices, you will definitely see it degrade. And that's where we started making better power options for Jammix. That's why we have a 24-pin ATX power supply. So, but we'll cover all the options. Let's go ahead and get a beefier DC barrel jack power supply on here, and we'll kind of show that one. So I'm going to go ahead and power down Jammix. You could use a triad power supply for this. I've got just a generic one here. I really like this power supply because it's really chunky, and if you start putting definitely heavier stuff on the USB ports, and like let's say you have 4 controllers, that's one of the reasons I like this case, is that I could put 4 USB controllers on the front of this case and really play along with still having these 3 modules. I could put them in the back here. Jammix does have 4 USB ports in the back, has 2 headers on the board here. So, you know, there's a lot you could do with power options. Not shown with this case also is a hard drive mount. I've taken it out so you could see it. But if I had some spinning hard drives on Jammix here, you know, we would definitely want something, a power supply with a little bit more beef to it. And so I really like this one. This is an 8 amp power supply. It is a 5 volt power supply. This is like, it's under 20 bucks on Amazon. You could go with the triads. They're great power supplies too. You probably don't want to go anything lower than 4 amps and probably nothing higher than 10 amps. Probably like 4 to 6 is like the sweet spot where it's good. But this one was, I think 18 or 19 bucks. I'll leave a link to it on Amazon. Good. Again, the triads are really good. Let me go ahead and plug this one in. And again, I'm going to use the barrel jack on the main 5 volt. And I'll go ahead and plug it in. And let me get my USB tester so you guys can see it here. So 5.5. So that's really good. I mean, it's right at 5. Everything's getting plenty of power. If we measure the fan board here, can you see that? So it's like 5.2. Probably by the time it goes through the fuses and the ribbon cable, by the time it hits the actual DE10, we're probably talking 5.1. So not bad. And again, as this power supply ages, it's more likely to decrease in voltage. So this power supply should last a long time, especially if you're going to use a lot of USB devices. I generally keep between 4 and 6 USB devices on Mister, depending on what I'm doing. I definitely always have a keyboard, mouse, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi set up. So, and of course, you know, just depending on your use, you know, you're going to want to have more power. Now, if you're not a heavy user, you can probably get by with less. Let's look at the last option here, and that's an ATX Power Option. So I'll go ahead and power off Jammix here. So the ATX Power Option, for people who are not familiar with it, this is a Pico. You could also use, let me see if I have one laying around. I don't. You could also use the big, yes I do, there we go. ATX power supply. So like this is a big full-size ATX computer power supply. If your case, I mean this one's literally as big as the entire case for Jammix right here. But if you were putting Jammix in a larger case and wanted a large style power supply, you could use something like this. It plugs right into that 24 pin. I really like these little Pico power supplies for Jammix. First of all, they're small. They don't take up a whole lot of room. They're not terribly expensive. And the switching regulators on them switch a really high frequency, so it's probably a lot better than what you're going to get in like a standard wall wart. Now, the other thing to note is that Picos need a 12 volt power supply. And that's what I'm hooking up right now, is a barrel jack to the Pico that has a 12 volt. So this is the 12 volt power supply that I'm going to use for this Pico. This is a DC 10 amp power supply. I really wouldn't go higher than 10 amps. You really don't need that much. I like this power supply though. I'll leave a link to it, and as well as the Pico and the other power supply in the description of the video. Again, you could always use a triad power supply. Those are great too. And I'm going to plug that in here. And let's go ahead and power it up. Okay. Again, you can see my USB devices are at like a 4.9, 4.9, 4.95, 4.96. I have, again, 3 of those devices in here. And, you know, they're running just fine. Again, I don't think you need to be extremely anal with getting exactly 5 volts. I've seen, like I said earlier, Jammix and Mr. run as low as, or the De10s run as low. Let me see if I can get, sorry, I was probing the wrong stuff there. So right here, if you can kind of see it, I'm right at 5 volts. And so we get, you know, pretty good power supply. And again, we want, you know, it doesn't have to be exactly 5 volts, but we want it to be close to it, especially if we have a lot of USB devices. They're expecting power at 5 volts. The De10's expecting power at 5 volts. So, you know, this 4.96 range is very good. Where we get concerned is when we start seeing it go below 4.7 or as high as maybe like 5.25. I've seen De10s run that high. It's definitely not great for them long term. So, but I hope this video clears up some of the different power options for Jammix and helps everybody understand just what you can do with it. So, thanks for watching.